September 13th, 2013. What is the significance of that date, you may be asking? Why is this the first thing I'm hearing when I tune in to my Monday flagship Lions of Liberty podcast? Well, that day, September 13th, 2013, is the day that the very first episode of the Lions of Liberty podcast dropped. My interview with Stefan Kinsella, the first time I had interviewed anybody, the first time I had ever done a podcast, and now almost 6 years later, not almost, exactly 6 years later, we are releasing a documentary, a mini documentary. It's about 15 minutes long, entitled And Live Free, the Lions of Liberty story. This is a documentary with footage shot on our way to, from, and at PorcFest this past summer, paid for entirely by our supporters, our friends, our Lions of Liberty pride, our most loyal fans who send us monthly contributions on Patreon. And those loyal fans can watch this documentary right now by heading over to their Patreon. Anybody who is a member of the pride at $5 or higher per month can see that right now. But for the rest of you, it will be releasing on September 13th, 2019, the 6th year anniversary of the Lions of Liberty podcast. There is a free trailer that anybody can watch right now. I will post that over at today's show notes, which you can find over at lionsofliberty.com/415.
Welcome to the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here's your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Marc Claire.
All right, my guest today is the co-host of the Part of the Problem podcast with our friend Dave Smith. He also hosts his own show called Run Your Mouth. I'm very pleased to welcome, for the very first time, the king of the Caucs himself. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. Robbie, are you ready to roar?
Hell yeah, man. I'm ready to party, get my roar on, Lions, and all that shit. Let's do it, baby.
I love it. I'm hearing all the keywords. Party, Lions, roar. It sounds like you're prepared.
I'm ready to do it, man.
Sweet, dude. Well, Robbie, it is your first time here, and I feel like you kind of brought the fire because my soul is currently sweating out of my body here in the Lions of Liberty studios in 80-degree Los Angeles. Now, 80 degrees might not sound like a lot, but when you're trapped inside a small room inside your house with no ventilation or air conditioning, it's a little hot. So I think you brought the fire directly to me. But we can talk about more about how hot and gross I feel right now a little bit later on.
Can we get a sweat report as the thing's going?
Absolutely.
It's back. I want the whole status as we go.
I'll try to give updates maybe every 10 minutes. If you start to get curious and you need an update, feel free to let me know.
All right. I'm going to ask questions.
All right. So I'll give you the first status. Right now, I simply have a small layer of film on my forehead. Hasn't gone much further than that, but it's very early. So we'll see.
All right. Well, when it gets to your ass crack, let me know.
All right. Well, in the meantime, why don't you start off just telling us a little bit more about yourself, where you grew up, how you got into comedy and politics, and how you eventually found yourself sitting across from our good friend Dave Smith on Part of the Problem.
Oh, great questions all around. Well, firstly, I know Dave for a lot of years, even before I was on the podcast. We used to hang out at this comedy club called LOL. It's the world's worst comedy club, but
Lions of Liberty? The Lions of Liberty Club? Wow.
No, it's over in Times Square. It's also the world's most unoriginal name for a comedy club, but him, myself, Louis J. Gomez were there just about every single night, and we got to get up a lot, and we all got better at comedy doing it, which was fun. And Dave, this was a crazy moment I had with Dave. I know I've shared this story before, but, Dave was this really smart guy. He was always talking politics in the green room, and he felt like he was Mr. Smarty Pants. And so one day I was like, I'm going to outdo this character who thinks he's so clever and knows everything. And I was like, Dave, you got to check out this book I'm reading. And it was David Stockman's, whatever his first book was. I already forget the name of it, The Great Deformation. Uh-huh. And I was like, I definitely have Dave on this one. He's like, yeah, I already read that. That's a great book. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? You read this one? So just to take a step back, I started doing comedy all the way back in college. I went to college for finance and learned really quickly that I hated it. And always was interested in comedy and radio and television. And what was cool about stand-up was you could just show up to open mics and do it. And, no one really pay attention to you or tell you that you should continue doing it, but you could show up and just do it. And so I just started, and
it's not like other jobs. Like you can't just show up and try being a firefighter. You know, you have
no. At some point, they'll
first.
be like, "Dude, you're not a firefighter. You're not helping us out."
You can't just show up and try open heart surgery. You know,
no. You can't just show up to a welding site and be like, "Dude, I'm just gonna weld." You know, like.
No, I'll figure it out. I just need to fuck up a few times, and I'll get it.
Yeah. Don't worry. Like I'm good with blowtorches. I'll get this going in no time. So, I just started doing it. I'm still doing it. I love it. And along the way, I met Dave, and he handed me some libertarian literature. I've become more libertarian as I go, and was always really interested to some extent in politics, which kind of came from the finance background. You got to be somewhat informed in what's going on in the world, because those are the people, like, you want to know who really knows what's going on. You walk into any hedge fund or like real smart finance guys, they know what's going on because like they're actually placing bets on it. So, they have to be in the know.
Right. Their entire existence relies on having some kind of insider information, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, go talk to someone who's trading currencies. Believe me, they're as libertarian as they cut. Like, those guys know what's really going on in the world.
Mm-hmm. So when you first went into finance, so was that just because it seemed like, I got to make money, I got to go into business, something that can actually earn me a living? At what point did you sort of realize that the amount that you weren't passionate about that you actually had to go and kind of pursue things you were actually passionate about, comedy or radio and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it was I grew up like Orthodox Jewish. There were a lot of finance people in that. Well, it wasn't just finance people, but they were all like serious professionals. It was lawyers, doctors. It was that crowd. And of those jobs, working in finance seemed the most exciting. And a lot of what I was interested in finance doesn't really exist anymore. Like what I thought was super cool was kind of the prop trading, and that job literally doesn't exist, or if it does exist, it's going to Harvard graduates. I also graduated in the years that the financial collapse happened, so those jobs were pretty hard to come by. But I'll tell you the two biggest things that kind of opened up my eyes to the fact that I just wasn't going to work in finance was I talked my way in college into a job where I was working on a gold trading desk, and everything that they were doing was completely over my head. But it wasn't just that. They gave me like a book. It was I don't know if you're a finance guy, but there's this one guy who wrote like the best book on options. It was like the Black-Scholes model, whatever the fuck it was. And they gave it to me to read. And, I'm coming in every day and I'm interacting with these career professionals, been working in this career for over 25 years. And I didn't read a single page of that book. I never came in and really wanted to ask them questions about what they were doing because I was doing open mic at night. And I just realized, okay, this really isn't what I'm passionate about. And like, I kind of feel that way. If you don't love something and you're not going to be all in about it, you're never really going to be successful because you're not going to really care to do it. So that kind of opened up my eyes to the fact that I wasn't really. The other thing is I'm a huge spaz, which I didn't know at the time. Like, I'm really a spaz. And I'm telling you, if I worked on a trading desk, I would have cost companies millions of dollars just on dumb errors. Like, I can't, I work in sales, and like sometimes we catch my dumb errors on contracts. Like, can I tell you a funny story? Just dumb errors.
Yeah, absolutely. I love dumb error stories.
I once went to my boss. I couldn't have been prouder. I was like, look, it's the biggest contract we got yet. I got a signed contract for whatever the amount of money was. And he just takes one look and he goes, dude, you spelled your name wrong. So I'm very fortunate to
I want to know which part of your name you spelled wrong. Was it the Steen, the Rob? I mean,
yeah, no, it was the Steen. It was it was a digital signature, and I somehow just forgot the S or something. I don't know what it was, but it was pretty blatant. And props to my boss that he managed to cut me down in less than 3 seconds. He was also funny about it. He literally said, he goes, listen, if you ever ask for a raise again, I just want you to remember that you couldn't spell your name right on the contract.
So that conversation is not going to take very long. The answer is no.
I also did really poorly towards the end of college. Like, I failed a lot of classes. So I just realized, like, dude, I'm not getting a job anywhere. So, those were all the things that got me out of finance and into comedy.
I was the opposite in college. I failed really poorly in the beginning because I found high school so easy, but I didn't party that much in high school. And as soon as I got to college, I did. And then I realized, you actually have to do like some amount of work to not just bomb all these classes. So I went in the opposite direction. I got slightly better as I went along.
Dude, I partied all of high school. I was a party animal. And then college, towards the end, I totally stopped. There was no party. It was just all nervous. Holy shit, I can't pass these classes. And it was largely, you know what it was? Finance was the wrong major for me. I don't know if you're this way. Like, you give me like history, like information spit back, I can do that all day, or like political science, all like legal law, like all that stuff all day. I'll get A's on there. Like, I never showed up to school and I was a straight A student, but then the classes that killed me was the later finance stuff. It was like statistics, and one of the higher math classes. I forgot. I can't even remember what it was.
Trig or one of those things.
No, whatever calculus. It was just calculus, simple calculus. I found if you didn't show up to class, like the information you were tested on wouldn't be in the textbook kind of thing. So I didn't know how to like self-teach myself that. And it was like Groundhog Day. I failed calculus, I think 4 times. And I finally told the guy like, hey man, this is the last class I need to graduate. I'm never going to pass it. Do you mind?
Can you just help us out here? Get me out of here.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when you realize that sales is the right career for you, when you can convince professors to just pass you because, you just kind of need the favor.
I think that's the real skill. I think a lot of the things we learn in college aren't necessarily the exact things that we learn in the textbook. It's kind of a lot of like how to maneuver these systems, how to network, how to, sort of become the kind of person that can handle the sort of things that are thrown at you. Not necessarily, at least life skill wise. Maybe in the class you need to learn the stuff. Yeah, but the stuff I take from college is more, more the life lessons and the people I met.
I agree with that 100%. And I didn't do a good job of that. With the part of it is the just not getting frustrated, showing up every day and just getting it done, which is also part of the negative of college. That's kind of the indoctrination that I think they want to impose on us, is obedience. And also, the willingness to learn information that firstly can be largely irrelevant to your life or just wrong, but it's important for them that you just show up and take it in and memorize it and spit it back. But then if you really do want to work a corporate job, those are all important skills, and learning how to not get frustrated and just keep showing up and doing it is definitely, it's definitely a good skill. I didn't have it, but if kudos to the people that do. Very much so. And,
I think one thing that's sort of interesting about college, I totally just had when you have a thought and then you start to say it, and by the time you get 5 words in, the thought is completely gone.
Oh, dude, that's every time I open up my mouth. Or sometimes in the middle, I'm like, are you still talking? Do you have a point here? Come on, wrap this up. Give the other guy a chance.
I think that's one of the skills of podcasting that I've learned too, is especially because sometimes we'll do like a live type show where I can't necessarily just have a complete stop. I'll just be like, all right, I'm going to keep talking and keep saying words until I actually think I've come up with a question about this thing that I'm about to talk about. And okay, what's your thoughts on that, Rob?
Yeah, I'll tell you, here's a good sales skill. At the end of like sentences that make no sense, you can just throw in like, so does that make sense? You just put it on the other person. Or like, here's another fun thing.
And then they might think it's their fault for if they don't think it made sense. And then they start to get in their own head. Like, wait a minute.
Oh yeah, it works so well. Or another one is, before you say something complicated, this is a great one. You go, all right, so just to keep things simple, and then you say the most complicated thing you're going to say.
And they're like, wait, why didn't I think that was simple? I must be really dumb.
Exactly. It's great skills. I recommend both of them to anyone listening.
All right. Well, what I meant to get into was how you were talking earlier about how you're doing this finance stuff and your passion just wasn't in it, but you did have passion for something you weren't even getting paid for when you were going out and doing open mic night. And clearly, I think that you probably saw a dichotomy there where you're supposed to keep up showing up at work and doing this one thing, but meanwhile, there's this other thing you do after work that you're so much more passionate about. So, at what point do you sort of make that decision to just actually completely change careers? Because I think a lot of people get stuck in a situation, especially people that maybe dedicate like 4 years of college or even more, people that might dedicate graduate school or that sort of thing to a specialized skill, and oftentimes they get to that job and they might not be passionate about it, they might not love it, but they just continue to do it and do it and do it because it's what they've invested all this time in. But it's really, if you think about it, it's a sunken cost. That time is already spent, it's gone, you can never get it back. So it makes sense to just always pursue whatever you're passionate about. But that seems to be really difficult for a lot of people to do, to sort of make that, kind of break that connection between what the time they spent in the past and, what they're doing presently. So how were you able to make that shift and say, all right, I'm not happy on this course that I set for myself. I have to go. And even though this other thing, diving into the stand-up comedy world, that's going to be challenging. Some people might say I'm really stupid for doing this, but you did it anyway. So what made you make that shift?
Great question. And firstly is I was very lucky in college that I worked a handful of internships every year. And every time I worked a new internship, I just discovered a new career path that wasn't for me. So I felt very fortunate in college to work, a bunch of various different jobs and just realize, hey, I hate all these, so I better figure out something else that better suits my skill set. What I'm very fortunate with is I just learned really early on that I guess typical workforce jobs aren't for me. And when you're young and single, you got more agility to kind of make these investments. And to this day, I'm still extremely single. And what's nice about that is you can just walk into a job any day of the week, tell them to go fuck themselves and move on with your life. There's not a ton of, I don't have a mortgage. I don't have car payments. I don't really have anything that, there are real life factors that kind of keep people into shitty positions, shitty careers or whatever. My recommendation for people, and I'm living this model, I still work a full-time day job that isn't my favorite thing, but I'm heavily invested in, I do my own podcast. I do Dave's podcast. I do stand-up every night of the week. Those activities don't really pay me very well. At some point, I hope to make the majority of my income from those. What I would recommend to people, especially like if you're making good money because you've worked hard and you've gotten yourself a good career job, kudos to you. You've done something that I couldn't do. And it means you probably have a lot of really valuable skills, and it's not a sunken cost. I'm sure all of your information and your ability to sit down and retain information, like you've built a lot of skills. So especially if you're getting paid pretty well doing what you're doing, just keep doing it. My recommendation would be start investing time in what you think the other thing that you'd like to do more is. If you have kids, that might not be an option, but then, that's the choice you're making. You're sacrificing working a job you don't like to give to your kids. And I don't think that's a bad or unfair lifestyle. You just have to realize, you can't win in life. You make your choices. There's a risk reward. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I take huge satisfaction personally in that there's no winning. You kind of get, you get what you work really hard for, and you choose kind of the investments that you're going to make. But my recommendation to anyone is if you have a side thing that you think you'd be interested in, which I'm sure is kind of what you're doing with this podcast. I imagine that you, have a job, but that's what you do on your weekends.
You imagine correctly.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. You're doing it also. You find this to be more interesting, but you don't make money doing these things day one. You're not an expert doing it day one. And unlike going to law school and taking on debt or becoming a doctor where there's guaranteed income on the backside, there's no guaranteed income doing things like this, but you definitely build skills that even in your corporate job will pay you. So my recommendation is just in your spare time, invest in yourself, start just doing whatever you think that thing is that you'd like doing more. You'll find out pretty quickly if it's something that you're passionate about and you love. And if it is, just keep fucking doing it and hope at some point you're so good that they pay you. That's my approach.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty wise way to look at things because, no matter, we're all in a situation, even people like me, like I love my quote unquote day job. I love what I do. I don't know if I would spend 40 plus hours doing it every week if I wasn't getting paid. I might do that. Well, not might. I've done that with podcasting. So I know I would do that with podcasting, factually speaking. But I think even when we have jobs we love, there's always other things we might be more passionate about, other things we know we would dedicate more time in. And it doesn't need to be all or nothing. You don't need to quit your job to start pursuing something else. You don't need to completely flip everything on a dime. You can still do the responsible thing and live in the real world where you need to get some income. And obviously, like you said, it depends on your situation. If you're a single guy like you and me, you have more flexibility. If you have a wife and kids to rrely on or that rely on you, well, that's a little different. Or you might just need to have a little sit-down conversation with the kids about how daddy can't take care of them for a while. Because daddy wants to podcast, God damn it.
Daddy's walking out because he thinks podcasting is a good idea. The other suggestion I have for people, and I know not everyone's brains works this way, but I'm kind of analytical and I can really kind of see things as component parts. And sometimes if you have a job that you're pretty skilled at and you don't like, you can probably start looking at it and realize, well, here's my list of daily activities, and I really enjoy when I have to do this kind of work, and I hate when I have to do that other kind of work. And I think if you can start recognizing that, you can start figuring out, how do I do a better job of delegating tasks or explaining to my company that I add more value when I'm focused on this one thing that I actually enjoy doing. And if you work in that way, I think over the course of like 3 or 4 years, you can figure out how to, reinvent your job so that you can do actually more of the things that you enjoy doing. I guess the example for that would be like, for instance, I work in sales. There's a lot of back end work that needs to be done, drawing up contracts, prospecting, keeping things organized. I hate all that shit. It's not for me.
That sounds like the awful part to me. The actual talking to people sounds like the fun part.
Yeah, exactly. So what I try and do is hire other people who can do the back end work, and I try and specialize on the being on the phone part. And other people it's a skill. Other people are terrible on the phone. They don't know how to close. They don't know what I mean? That is a paid skill. And so what I try and figure out with my day job is how can I spend as much time on the phone as possible, because then I'm making everybody money and then I don't have to do the bullshit that I hate. So that's the other way, and you can do that. Like if you're a lawyer, there's some people that love researching. There's some people that love being in court. So you got to figure out how do you set up your practice so that you can be doing the part that you love and getting paid for it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey friends, I got to take a quick pause here to tell you about another great libertarian podcast out there. It's called Free Man Beyond the Wall, hosted by the artist formerly known as Mance Rayder, now known simply by his real name of Pete Raymond. And I gotta tell you, Pete is a machine. This guy brings you a new episode of his own every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and he has done some absolutely fantastic in-depth interviews. He's had on everybody from Ron Paul to Thaddeus Russell to Phil Labonte, the lead singer of All That Remains, a very diverse group of guests, not always libertarians. He also did a great show with a Washington, D.C. insider lobbyist revealing a lot of the dirt that goes on behind the scenes in DC. He has done so many interviews that I have just said, darn, I wish I did this one myself. So I really do want to highly recommend checking out Free Man Beyond the Wall. You can find it over at freemanbeyondthewall.com, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and all those fancy podcatchers out there. So, Robbie, let's dive a little bit more into this whole libertarian thing and how you got wrapped all up in this. And, you told the story a little bit earlier about, talking to Dave and thinking he was a smart guy in the room, trying to top him with the Stockman book, which did not work. But I'm kind of curious where your political thoughts began. When you were growing up in high school or that kind of thing, did you think about politics at all? What was sort of your baseline before you started to think in a more libertarian way?
Well, I'll tell you, this really did have a big impact on me. And I know that it's kind of like the dumber side of being a libertarian, but I smoked a lot of weed in high school and I loved weed. I mean, I don't smoke as much anymore, but that was my thing. I was like a total pothead. That was my entire jam. And when I was in high school, it was a different landscape, especially in New York, for smoking weed. I mean, you could legitimately get in trouble. I also have very conservative parents. It was not culturally, you were doing drugs when you were smoking weed. That doesn't exist anymore. That's not really the way that people see it.
Sure, yeah.
But at that time, that's what it was. And what was interesting about, smoking weed in high school was that you realize, hey, government's not my friend. I'm doing this thing here that I'm not bothering anyone. I really enjoy this. This is kind of what I'm all about with my life. And government is telling me that I'm a criminal and then I can go to jail for this. And then when you start thinking about the concept of going to jail for drug usage, I mean, it's comical. It's the government basically saying, hey, you can ruin your life by doing this, so we're going to put you in jail to make your life better. So I just kind of understood as early as high school, just from being a person who enjoyed doing drugs and being told that I was a criminal for something that I enjoyed doing, hey, government's not my friend. And clearly, clearly there's something nefarious going on here because I just know that I'm not a bad person for smoking weed. So I would just say, first and foremost, that was a real eye-opener to what isn't a lot of people's take on government of, hey, these guys are here for me and they're a resource and they're helping us out. Right away, early in high school, I had the idea of okay, clearly, government's not my friend. Then moving on from there, what's interesting about pursuing finance is even in college, you do get a better picture of some of what's really going on in the world. So first is, I would say, what makes me totally just not a liberal was I was always very anti-debt. The usage of debt by government never made any sense to me. The whole concept of it makes no sense. Do you ever read Mad Magazine as a kid?
Oh, I loved Mad Magazine as a kid. I actually had a family friend who worked for the magazine and used to send me these magazines every month. I would get a bunch of them. So yeah, I was obsessed.
No, that's great, man.
That's awesome.
Was it an artist or a writer?
I think he was one of the editors at one point.
That's cool. That's so
cool. I'd have to go and think back and talk to my parents and re-ask them exactly what his role was. Yeah, but I do remember reading those vociferously, and I didn't really think about it politically at the time. But now that you mention it, I mean, that probably was one of my first exposures to politics and sort of the satirical aspect of politics.
Oh my! And the way that they cut down government, firstly, they'd bring up topics that no one else was exposing you to, especially as a kid. I got a poster; it's still on my wall, it's like an Uncle Sam spoof with Bush saying, "I hear you," listening with headphones, and then on the bottom, thanks to unwarranted, phone hacking or whatever. Or I had another poster on my wall, which was a spoof of the Star Wars Clone Wars movie. But it was for Iraq War II. They just spoofed it, that it was the second coming of that.
Right.
I also remember this wasn't in like one of the comic books when I was a kid, but they did, and I can't find it. And it was so fucking funny, but they did this thing like your mom tells you this while the government's doing that. It was like a simple joke like structure. And I just remember one of the jokes was your mom tells you to save money. Meanwhile, the government is blank amount in debt and printing bills. So like, firstly, just exposure to Mad Magazine definitely kind of cut into government a little bit.
They were basically political meme culture before we had memes and before we had the way to distribute, memes in that fashion.
Oh, absolutely. By the way, I think memes is part of what killed Mad Magazine, because Mad Magazine comes out monthly, and so much of what their humor was, they used to literally, one of like their feature things was they would Snapchat things from movies and then add dialogue to it, with like fake dialogue, which is straight up memes. And I think that's one of the biggest problems is so much of what they were doing is now just on Instagram and Twitter.
Everyone's done it by the time they go to press. I mean, it's already been all around the internet 1,000 times.
Yeah, exactly. Just coming out once a month is too slow. But anyways, just conceptually, I never understood government's usage of debt, and I would say I was what they would call like a New York Democrat, where socially you're liberal, fiscally you're conservative, which doesn't even really fit into either party. Now, two of the things that really kind of shifted my mind more towards being a libertarian is I took a class in college called it was the economics. No, it was the political science of economics, or it was one of the two, the economics of political science. And what it was about was like, hey, listen, we have some really good ideas for how government should run, and economists come up with really good ideas for how we can, benefit the economy. Why is it that politicians don't actually put these things into action? That was basically what the course was about. And one of the books that we quasi read was this book. It was called The Logic of Political Survival. It's by this guy. I'm going to fuck up his name. It's like Bruce Buno de Mesquite or Mosquito. I don't know. He's got a weird last name.
I don't know his real name, but it sounds like you probably messed it up one way or the other.
Oh, I totally messed it up. But he's like, he's a political science guy at NYU. He's really interesting, wrote some great books. And basically the theory of that book is that, human behavior is very highly predictable with game theory, based off of the incentives. And the basic premise of that book is that power is a commodity, and politicians are in the business of distributing goods to a base, and their entire job is to get elected. And so what we can predict is that basically the bigger the base is that they have to distribute goods to, at least the more of a democratic, like in other words, if you got like a system like where it's a dictatorship, and the dictatorship basically has to distribute goods to 7 or 8 people, the general and this guy and that guy, in order to stay in power. Then you end up with, a highly corruptive society where not that much, gets back to, the individuals. Whereas by the way, I think the technical term was the selectorate. And I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but like if you take the US, which is a democracy, so at least like we have a very large selectorate that you have to give out free goods to, which is why you end up with things like healthcare. At least some of it's coming back to people. But at the end of the day, politicians are not, they're not trying to get elected so that they can help us out. They're in the business of power, and they're going to that's all they want is power. And it's all about kind of the political structure in which at least they have to do something for the people in order to be in power. And that's kind of predictable. But that just exposed me like really early on to the idea of, hey, these politicians, they're in the business of themselves, and they're in the business of power. So coming out of college, I kind of had the perspective of government's not our friend. They're not helping us out. And then one of the big things was I never heard of the term libertarian until I came across the comedy of Doug Stanhope.
Yeah.
And I mean, that guy's got some incredible bits exploring the concept of liberty, which are hilarious. And I literally had never heard the word libertarian until his comedy. And then once I was exposed to the idea of being a libertarian, I just always kind of told people, I don't like really being in groups. I know this kind of bothers people, and like, it's that, it's kind of like almost that bisexual thing of, hey, don't label me here. But ever since then, I always kind of just use the term, I lean libertarian, and and I still kind of feel that way.
And then that way you don't need to fully commit to someone who might be like libertarian. You're like, well, I just said I lean, and I don't know.
I don't know exactly. I'm doing my own thing here. I'm not on any teams. I'm available for hire. I'm farming myself out here. I belong to no political affiliations. I'm on Team Me, and lucky for me, I've been embraced by the Mises Caucus. I'm the king of the Caucs. I like being in charge. I get to make the decisions. That works out well for me.
The king of the Caucs. So maybe we'll get into more of your role as the king of the Caucs in a little bit. I'm kind of curious a little more. How much, obviously, I got to imagine it's a pretty good amount because of how passionate it is and now the fact that you actually work right next to him. So how much did Dave really take your sort of libertarian leanings and I guess push them, maybe leaning a little more and more and more into the libertarian ideas as you've gone along here over the years? Are there any like positions specifically that you held previously and maybe, either his insight or maybe the insight of others have really challenged you on that you've really said, okay, on these issues, I've gone full libertarian here?
Yeah. One of the biggest ones, like years ago, Dave recommended to me, Murray Rothbard's writings. And the first book he recommended to me was, what's the really small one? The what's like the small one that people love? The one that's it's almost like a pamphlet. You can read it, 2 episodes of diarrhea. You can get through that one. The way I remember information, it's the one with like the face with all like the sinews and that shit in it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I remember enough vague information that I'll only recall it fully once we end the conversation or end the phone call. That's so we might be a bad combination for recollection here.
What's his main book that if you're recommending a Murray Rothbard book, what's the first one you're recommending?
Well, a lot of people say For a New Liberty. That's not really a pamphlet one. Oh, I think I know. You're talking about Anatomy of the State.
Yeah, Anatomy of the State. Thank you.
There we go. See, we got there.
I was very close. So Dave loves Anatomy of a State. That book didn't quite do it for me. I loved For a New Liberty. The reason I love For a New Liberty is he gives such a great breakdown of, like, in practical terms, here's how we could do things better without the state. And I found those arguments to be, like, on some of the things I wouldn't have conceived, hey, we don't need schools. Or that's absurd to say we don't need schools. But then in his breakdown, I was like, oh yeah, that's a better way of going about this. So For a New Liberty definitely, really changed my mind about how much government do we really need. And then being around Dave, I've been exposed to so much, so many big ideas that I still haven't sat down to read. And one of the biggest ones I would say he really changed my mind on is I would have said, before being on his show, when it came to foreign policy, I would have just said, this is beyond me. I don't really quite understand the dynamics between countries. And maybe it is kind of like a dog-eat-dog world where if we don't have a massive military and we're not kind of out there and kicking people around.
The quote-unquote realist perspective.
Yeah, but I wasn't committed to that. I was standoffish where I would just be like, listen, I'm not going to comment on foreign policy because I don't quite understand the dynamics of it. And maybe there's a possibility that in a vacuum, if we didn't have a massive military, China would be over here. I don't really understand it. But, in spending more time on the show and hearing Scott Horton, and then also a sales book that I read really shifted my view on that. The sales book, I can't even remember the name of the book, but part of what they were saying in the book was basically if you view the world as a dog-eat-dog world, you kind of manifest it. And so like the joke I've said in regards to foreign policy is imagine like I'm trying to get some chick to marry me. And I go on a first date and like I really know, like, this is the one. We're going to get married. And I show up on the first date and I bring my divorce lawyer. Like, is that going to win her over? So it's like this idea of, hey, we're trying to be cooperative and we're trying to trade with other countries. And that's why we're building the largest military in the world and we're kicking them around and we're in their countries. And that's how we're creating a framework for being cooperative is just bullshit. You know what I mean? So that's definitely
it's like you show up to a business meeting with like 6 of your armed buddies holding Uzis and you're like, all right. And it's just your other buddy. You're like, okay, so I guess we're ready to chat here on even footing, right? And they're all pointing the guns right at his head. You're like, all right, okay. We're ready to negotiate.
I'm just here to be cooperative and make sure that we can trade and get along. And that's why that money you lend me is going to go for that guy's bigger gun. You know what? Like, it's right. Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm curious, are there any, because you still claim you're just a leaner. So since you're just leaner, are there any issues that you're like, okay, on this one, not necessarily that you might oppose the libertarian position, but you might just have some questions or, you can't get fully there for whatever reason. You have significant just thoughts about how it might actually work in the real world. What kind of is the most difficult, I guess, libertarian position for you to fully reconcile?
Well, okay, I'm gonna change your question a little bit, and
Yeah,
let's
go
change
ahead,
it
whatever.
to, what is it about the totally anarcho-libertarian opinion that you don't want to say, hey, I'm like I'm an anarchist? Can we go with that question?
I like guests that completely take my questions and change them. I'm a fan, so go for it.
Okay, was that not what you were at? I feel like that's
Oh,
what,
no, I think, no, I'm joking with you. I think that's awesome.
Okay,
Go
all right.
for it.
So I do kind of, and I've had this conversation with Dave. I have a slightly different approach to I guess to what brought me to liberty than a lot of the anarchists. And that is, I feel like you guys have this really strong love for the morality of the liberty of the individual, and a strong opposition to the concept of that something can be done for the greater good. Thus far, would you say that that's fair?
Well, I wouldn't say that individuals and groups can't come together to do things for the greater good. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I just think the way you organize for that greater good is important. The means you use is important. It can't just be through violence and it doesn't matter. Just like showing up to the meeting with your six friends with
let me make a change that I guess you guys would be strongly opposed to ever introducing force for the greater good. That conceptually becomes a moral issue for you.
Sure. Yeah. Non-defensive force. Sure.
Okay. So when I was reading, and this is kind of the difference between me and Dave a little bit, For New Liberty was very convincing to me for liberty, and that it kind of was a very, it was a breakdown of, hey, here's how we can do this better than government. When I read the other book, listen, I can't necessarily argue for you, and we can come up with some conceptual examples. I'm not saying that I'm right. I can just tell you that the idea that we should never initiate force for the greater good, it doesn't get me excited. I don't read that. Right. Like, I'm just saying emotion, like sometimes I read something and it gets me really excited. I'm like, oh, that's 100% right. I can get behind that. Sure. I wouldn't make decisions around that. And I think the one example I came up with Dave once when we were kind of debating this was, I said, let's say you got a heroin addict and the guy is totally addicted to heroin, and you had a magic pill that if you shoved it down his throat, he would never, his heroin addiction would just be cured. So in that case, can I not force it down his throat because I'm initiating force against a person? I know that he's going to benefit from the outcome, but you guys are saying, hey, you can never initiate force. And I understand that that's not a real world example.
Well, it could be. I mean, because something close to that. I mean, I think, I struggle with this a little bit sometimes because I think there are examples in the real world kind of similar to what you're saying, where it might technically be a violation of force, and you could say it's a violation of the NAP, where it's still sort of the right thing to do. Like, for example, if you have a friend who's just completely smashed, completely drunk, and they're about to go take their keys and go drive, and that there's a good chance they're going to hurt themselves or somebody. Like, I might just steal their keys. I might take their keys and hide them or do something with them. And you could say I initiated force. I took the keys from them. I've initiated violence of some kind. I've at least committed theft or temporary kidnapping or something. I mean, you could definitely say that is a technical violation of the NAP along those AnCap libertarian lines. I might still say, but it was still the right thing to do. So I do think there, on individual cases, there are sort of, I don't want to call them gray areas, because I think anything you can sort of break down and figure out eventually what the right thing to do is. But yeah, I see what you're saying. The point being, there are situations where you might look at a situation where you can apply a little force, and it's like, right. Okay, I feel like I did the right thing.
So just conceptually, I'm more excited by, hey, what will work better? And I honestly believe that a totally free market works better. But I also think that things can look really incredible on paper, and things can be unbelievable theories. But let me tell you, from kind of working in business, sometimes you have ideas that everyone agrees on, and it seems like the right idea, and you go and you try it, and it just turns out to be wrong. So my feeling with the totally free model and the total anarcho model is that I wish that people would give you guys a piece of land that you could go try it out, and I might want to go live there myself. But I just think that ideas on paper, until they're actually applied, sometimes you have no idea why something won't work, but it just won't work. It's almost like in that scene in The Matrix when the guy's discussing the design of the Matrix, and he said, hey, we tried to make a world where everyone could be, and for some reason humans just rejected it. And I think that there is some sort of like in any business or really anywhere, if people buy into something and they want to work hard because they like the structure, you're going to have success. And I think that there are a lot of people who actually like, a third-party control of violence, and they like the idea that, hey, everyone's forced to pay taxes and we all have to contribute to this thing. Some people, we've said it before, governments like religion, and some people, even though there's a tremendous cost to it, they feel like it's worthwhile. It's something that they want. What I would like is if we, what I've said is I think as limited and as small as you can make government and as localized as you can make government, then you can start getting at least better representation. You can start proving the model of, hey, what doesn't work here. And amongst proving the model, like, it's crazy to me that there's nowhere in the world that you can just, like, I don't even think you, like, if you were a billionaire, you were the living Koch brother, I don't think there's an island that you can just go live on, declare it Koch country, and live totally free and independent from a state. That's insane. That makes no sense.
Especially if you call it Koch country. I don't think they're going to leave you alone.
Well, that's true too. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, that's insane to me. So, like, my feeling on it is that, like, people should be able to live into areas where they're opting into government, and people should also be able to go experiment with the idea of having zero government, and people should be like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm very, which you can argue is basically an anarchy perspective. I'm just a little bit like, I'm almost more anarchist. And I'm like, hey, I don't want to force anarchy on people that want government. But more than anything else, I just feel like it's on us to kind of prove the model. And so, in whatever way we can get our piece of land and prove that it works, I do think that we would have the most success, and people would go, holy shit, that's actually a better way of living. And, oh my God, like, I can't believe the economic prosperity over there, or the healthcare that you can get, or the job opportunities. Like, I think those are all the ways that you really, you win people over, is by proving, hey, this works better. But at the end of the day, to me, it's all about what works better. And so just like philosophically, the idea of never imposing on people for the greater good, it's not that it's wrong. It's not that I can't debate morally that, like, that's not a better way that we should organize people. But at the end of the day, just the way I think in my head, I'm like, practically speaking, what's going to work? And I get very excited by what's been tried, tested, and is successful. And I would like it if we had more of an open landscape for people to try new ideas for government.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing is in many ways one of the biggest challenges for libertarians, and that really people overall, anybody who challenges the overall systems that everybody accepts that are in our society, because people just feel comfortable. A lot of people just like the idea of, hey, there's this government, they take money from me, and they take care of all the things I need to take care of. I don't want to go buy, like, hiring insurance companies to worry about my property and to protect me from things and to protect me from other governments. I just like how things are now, and it really is a challenge for libertarians to present not only a different moral way of looking at things and to convince them that people should think of things in a moral way, but that they should take a system that many people are somewhat comfortable in, and they should look at it completely radically differently. A lot of people will just say, well, why should I? I'm fine now. I'm fine how things are. I don't want to have this weird anarchist system. So, but I think the way you're describing things of giving people the ability to opt out or opt into some other non-governmental type of situation, I think that really is anarchy in many ways, because we're probably never going to convince everyone on the planet to not have these systems that we largely disagree with. I think the best we can maybe do is kind of what you're describing, like at least say, all right, well, can you let us go do it then? Can you let us just not be violent with us if we just want to go do something else? Can you not try to control an entire system the exact way you want to, and then I won't try to do the same thing to you, and then maybe over time everybody sort of figures out what works for them. And if we're not all trying to force the rest of the world into whatever system we decide on, maybe we can all live a little bit happier and not show up to our business meetings with our six friends with Uzis.
Yeah, and I really think a big part of it is the human opt-in element, that, like, it's like in any company, if you have motivated employees and they want to work hard, your chances of success are, significantly higher than if everyone shows up and feels like, hey, I'm forced to work here, I fucking hate this place, I'm going to do as little as possible. And I think that's almost like a lot of what's lost within our culture is that there's so much, government's taken on so much where they said, hey, listen, we can handle this, you guys don't have to do it, we can handle it. And so we don't really, at least from what I see, I grew up Orthodox Jewish, that was a very different landscape in terms of that they had very strong communities, and there was a lot of within the community, people helping each other out. Now that I'm outside of a community, there's literally zero of that. But like so much, like in other words, like, you know, socialism works on a kibbutz, I think, but that's because people are all there voluntarily and they are opting into, hey, I like this, and they want to make it work. If in a small group environment, people want to make something work and they're going to work hard for it, you're going to have a better outcome than, like, you know what I mean? Like if you force some people into Libertyville and they're so convinced that it won't work that they just have a bad attitude about it and they don't want to show up, you know what I mean? That's not going to work out for them either.
And the kibbutz, they're not going around to every other neighborhood they can find and saying, all right, come on, join our kibbutz or we're going to murder you.
Right, exactly. That's not how it works. So it like, I love it. I just think it needs to exist under an opt-in model. And I guess what I don't love, I don't know. I think I kind of explained my position. Which, like I said, when you come full circle, it's not that. I guess it's just my own way of framing what you can present as being, you know, anarchy.
To me, almost any system ultimately is morally okay and even morally compatible with libertarianism as long as there's an opt-in, opt-out, as long as you have voice and exit or voice or exit or something like that. I mean, as long as you're not completely forced into a system, the system itself isn't really as much of a problem. It's that initial force. You know, if you decide you can be in a system and then that system is based on the fact that you have agreed to have your taxes taken or what have you, or distributed in whatever way, well, I might think it's stupid, but it's, you know, as far as my moral concerns are, those are largely assuaged at that point.
Yeah, the conceptual, and this is just, you know, we're totally just going into the land of conceptual, but imagine we had that, and then at some point, every parcel of land, like 3 generations from now, was bought up, and societies decided to group themselves in a certain way. So now you're 3rd generation from people who decided to structure it in a way, and there was no new place that you could go to now, like, you know, invent your new whatever government, like wherever you were forced into some kind of rule. I don't know where I'm going with this. Like then that situation becomes interesting because you're like, oh, once again, there is no opportunity for opt-in. And what does 2nd generation force look like? Like, in other words, let's say me, you, and our grandfathers, we all agreed on a system of, hey, if you're going to live here, there's going to be a 30% tax. You're welcome to go live somewhere else, but we've decided that everybody who lives here has to contribute, and that almost like a zoning law. You know, we're all gonna share the cost for garbage and blank. And if you want to live within the border of this region, it's a 30% tax. So is that now forced? No, everyone agreed to it. Like literally, you could say 100% of people agreed to it. So what happens when you're 2nd generation person that lives within that area? So like, how's that viewed from a liberty perspective? Is that now force, or is that something that, like, you know, since people opted into it at some time, you kind of get what the question I'm posing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, at what point does that initial opt-in, you know, are you now forcing anyone? Essentially, you are forcing. Yeah, you're forcing every generation into that same system, unless they also have the same ability to opt out or perhaps even change the system. I mean, yeah, these are all hypothetical situations that I hope can get more worked out in the real world someday, I guess. Yeah,
but from a very practical standpoint, like just now to go super practical, what I really I think is achievable, and I'm a big fan of state rights, and I think just the more localized government is, the more of an opportunity people have to congregate with like-minded people and at least get a government that reflects their interests. And what's really powerful about that is, like, let's say you had no federal government and like Texas was totally Texas, and you had some real freedom-loving people that all started congregating in similar areas. You might end up where they show, hey, if we get rid of all the licensing laws, companies have come in and started providing really affordable healthcare. We actually have the best healthcare in the entire nation. And then other states start realizing, hey, we got to duplicate that. And we're already seeing that, and you're going to see more of this, is as states go bankrupt because they've got these huge, massive pensions and liabilities, and the taxes go up and people start fleeing for other states. There already is competition among states for people, which is a form of capital. And so the more localized government is, the more we kind of force them at least to act like a business, and, you know, have to try and recruit us to want to live there for our tax dollars. So I, at least like in practical terms, I would say that would be what I'd like to see more of.
For sure, Rob. And before we drop off here, at least with the main show, I know you're going to stick around for a little bonus show. I want you to get in a little more to your own podcast, the Run Your Mouth podcast. It's a fun show. I've tuned in quite a bit. It's I'd say it's not a political show, but some of the ideas kind of creep in there. It's sort of a more of a comedy take on things, and also you're coming off a pretty fun summer, I think. Why don't you tell us a little about what you've been doing too? I believe you've been something about hanging out on patios, smoking weed. I don't know.
So we've been doing the summer porch tour, and
porch tour. There you go.
Yeah, the idea of the summer porch tour is that I really don't get out of New York City much, and so and I love a good porch. I love sitting outside. And
who doesn't love a good porch?
Exactly. Porches and sandwiches bring people together. You know, we didn't get into that, but you really want to know how we can make the world a better place. It's more porches, more sandwiches. And so what we do is listeners invite us over to their porches. We go out there, they co-host the episode, and those have been a lot of fun. If you've never checked out the show, like you said, it's more of a comedy show. Sometimes we really do get into headier libertarian politics. Today I'm going to be doing a full episode on Bitcoin with the Fagcast guys. Yeah, we do.
Those guys are always trying to one up me with my guests. I'm going to get this show out before they do, though.
they're coming on to my podcast, so you're safe and sound.
Okay. Well, then you're the one upping me before I get them on.
Well, you want to hang out for the Bitcoin show?
I got stuff to do.
Oh, look at that! Now you're the one blowing me off.
Now I got a big time, both of you.
I respect it. So yeah, definitely tune in. We definitely do talk liberty topics, but it's not the focus of the show. We did a whole show where we competed to see who could smoke more of an ounce of weed. We'll spend an hour debating what kind of bread is best on a sandwich, and then we'll talk about Bitcoin for an hour. So we're just idiots being idiots, and it's fun. Check it out.
All right. Well, I can't leave the audience completely wondering. So, what is the best type of bread to create a sandwich from in the Rob Bernstein point of view?
Well, what kind of sandwich are you talking about here? That's very vague.
See,
it's all about what we're gonna eat. I'm a big fan of rye bread. Like rye bread
is fantastic.
Rye bread's fantastic.
Very delicious, very Jewish. I love it.
I also I live in New York. I get some of the access to some of the greatest, freshest bagels in the world. Bagels are almost underrated in their versatility for what kind of sandwiches you can make. And most recently, cheap as all hell and healthy, I've had these Vermont Bread Company 100% whole wheat English muffins, and I've been making more like eggs and sausages and just throwing on there real cheap. And so I mix it up, but I'm gonna go with rye bread as my current number one.
All right, well, we might dive more into the sandwich stuff in the bonus segment we'll do for our Patreon. But until then, Rob, it's been a blast having you on the show. Keep up the great work. Keep up the great work you're doing, not just with Dave Smith on Part of the Problem, but with Run Your Mouth and everything else you're pursuing in life. We wish you nothing but the best, my man. So keep up that great work. Keep on roaring, Rob.
Roar!
All right, Liberty Kitties, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Robbie the Fire Bernstein. I know I sure did, and most importantly, I finally completed the Part of the Problem triumvirate. All of the Part of the Problem hosts have now been on this program. Of course, Dave has been on several times. Our good friend Mike Brancatelli, his former co-host, has been on a few times, and now, finally, the fire has come to roar with us, and the roaring did continue. We have an over 30-minute bonus segment for our Patreon subscribers. For as little as $5 a month, you get access to all of our bonus audio and video content, and Rob took questions from members of the Lions of Liberty Pride in that segment. Many, many ridiculous questions, and we had a really good time. So be sure to check out that bonus segment, or go ahead to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. Join the Pride for as little as $5 a month. Get access to that bonus segment and so much more amazing content, such as Conspiracy Corner. We're doing another one very, very soon. Degenerate Gamblers. They had an amazing episode on Friday. Over an hour and a half of just so many hilarious stories. A little bit of gambling talk, but mostly hilarious stories from our college days and otherwise. So I really do highly recommend checking out Degenerate Gamblers if you're in the Pride. If not, get the heck in there. And of course, if you don't want to cough up the $5 a month, we do have the introductory $2 Lions Cub level. It doesn't get you all the bonus audio and video content, but it does get you into our secret Facebook group, which allows you to see the live streams of our drunken Democratic debates, which are returning in September. The DNC decided to give us a month off. There were no Democratic debates in August, and I think we're all pretty fine with that. But they're coming back. They're actually coming back. Believe it or not, the second Democratic debate in September is airing the same day as we release and Live Free, the Lions of Liberty story, the Lions of Liberty mini documentary that I mentioned at the top of this show. Of course, you can also see that trailer. We post it on our Facebook, our Twitter. We'll have it on our Instagram. And of course, again, at today's show notes, this is the 415th episode of the flagship Lions of Liberty podcast. That means you can find the show notes at lionsofliberty.com/415. I'll also post the trailer for And Live Free over there. And again, you can see the full 15-minute mini documentary detailing our PorcFest adventure and our journey as podcasters by joining Patreon right now, or you can wait until September 13th. That'll be a big day. You got a Democratic debate, you got a Felony Friday, you got a live drunken recap with us, you got a documentary dropping September 13th, the 6th year anniversary of Lions of Liberty. Circle that one on your calendar, my friends. It's a Friday the 13th, too. I don't know if I should be worried about that or what. Is that a bad omen, a bad sign? I don't know. I'm just going to embrace it. We're gonna absorb all of this energy and make something out of it. So circle that day for Liberty on your calendar, for Liberty or bad omens, depending on what you believe. And of course, it's not just me doing this for the last 6 years. I brought on some fellow Lions of Liberty to help me grow this podcast, and that's why every Wednesday you can hear Brian McWilliams with his weekly shot of comedy, culture, and liberty on Electric Liberty Land. And of course, John Odermatt wraps things up with his amazing, hard-hitting, and inspirational look at the broken criminal justice system on Felony Friday, which will have its own separate podcast feed very soon. It will still be on the Lions of Liberty feed, but John, as he's mentioned on his show a couple times, is going to be starting a new separate feed to sort of allow people to get into these stories, these very inspirational stories, learn more about the criminal justice system without necessarily being attached to the libertarian label, which can, often prevent people from even getting into these ideas in the first place. So the hope is with a separate feed, we'll be able to attract people from different walks of life and to find out about these stories of injustice. And of course, we'd love to funnel these people right back here to this podcast, once they've dipped their feet in, once they've gotten things a little wet in the Liberty water, so to speak. So please do keep your eye out for that Felony Friday podcast feed coming very, very shortly. And we will have more to come. And one thing that's going to come very soon, if all goes well, I always have to say that because you never know when a recording can go awry. But we are planning on bringing back next week the latest edition of the Liberty Draft. There will be 2 more rounds of drafting with all 6 of my Lions. Of course, my fellow co-hosts, Brian and Odie, have their own Liberty Draft teams, as well as Howie, JB, and Rico are regular contributors here. So please do tune in next week for the Liberty Draft. It's always fun. It's always a good time. It's always a riot. Maybe even Robbie the Fire Bernstein will work his way into one of these teams. You never know. But that will be returning next week if all goes according to plan. And until then, folks, I only have one more request of you. And that is, of course, to just
live long and live free.